Welcome to Defending Digital. I'm Chad Warner. Today's topic, what's the best Mac antivirus based on malware tests? When you think of computer security, you probably think of antivirus, also known as anti-malware. And you probably associate antivirus with Windows, because Macs have a reputation for being more secure than Windows. As a Mac user, you probably wonder whether your Mac needs anti-malware software, and if so, how to choose the right software. Let's look at the data to find answers. The threats. Early in my IT career, I removed countless pieces of malware from consumer and business Windows PCs. I've seen firsthand the damage malware can do. I hope you have not been a victim of malware. Do you need antivirus or anti-malware for your Mac? Unsurprisingly, makers of Mac security software are happy to tell you about all the malware that could be targeting your Mac. I try to base my advice on data rather than on marketing, so let's look at the data. Before we continue, allow me to define anti-malware. It's software that prevents and/or removes malware, malicious software, from a device. The term antivirus is often used for software that's actually anti-malware because it fights not only viruses but other forms of malware. Mac malware exists. Any software can be compromised, and Mac OS is no exception. Although there's a lot less malware for Mac OS than for Windows, it does exist. AV Comparatives says, quote, whilst it is certainly true that the population of macOS malware is very tiny compared to that for Windows and Android, there have been instances of macOS malware getting into the wild. And SecureList.com, which is run by Kaspersky, says, from 2012 to 2017, the number of macOS users who have experienced attacks from malicious and potentially unwanted programs grew, approaching 255,000 attacked users per year. However, starting in 2018, the number of attacked users began to decrease, and in the first half of 2019, it only amounted to 87,000. The number of attacks on macOS users through malicious and potentially unwanted programs has been increasing annually since 2012, and in 2018, it exceeded 4 million attacks. During the first half of 2019, we registered 1.8 million attacks of this kind. The vast majority of threats for macOS in 2019 were in the adware category. End quote. And darkreading.com says, quote, attackers will likely increase their focus on the operating system, that's macOS, but the platform is still far from a popular target. Currently, only 3% of WatchGuard's network devices encountered malware targeting macOS. WatchGuard is not the only company to see an increase in malware tailored to the macOS. Security software firm Malwarebytes noted an increase in Mac malware, detecting some 16 million instances in just April, 4 times more than the previous monthly record over the past year. The data does indicate there is a rise in the prevalence of threats. The rise is likely connected to increasing popularity. For the most part, adware is driving the increase. WatchGuard noted that the most detected Mac malware program installed adware. For Malwarebytes, potentially unwanted programs, or PUPs, P-U-P-S, accounted for the largest category of Mac detections, followed by adware. Mac does have some nice security features, but they're fairly easy to bypass. While we have seen Mac malware, we have not seen a vulnerability be exploited in Mac software in the same way as on Windows. End quote. Note that, according to these quotes, Mac malware is mostly potentially unwanted programs, PUPS, and adware, both of which are less dangerous than other forms of malware. Security software built into macOS. Fortunately, Apple has included some anti-malware functionality in macOS. First is Gatekeeper, which checks software that you download from outside the App Store. Next is XProtect, which detects and blocks the installation of known malware. And then there's the malware removal tool, which removes known malware. However, these do not provide 100% protection. XProtect and the malware removal tool recognize malware based on lists provided by Apple, so they can't recognize malware that Apple hasn't yet added to the lists. Macworld says, quote, it's certainly not an essential requirement to install antivirus software on your Mac. Apple does a pretty good job of keeping on top of vulnerabilities and exploits, and the updates to the Mac OS that will protect your Mac will be pushed out over auto-update very quickly. However, sometimes Apple doesn't respond as quickly as Mac users might hope. In that case, there are some free antivirus apps that might give you some peace of mind. Malwarebytes.com says, Apple's Mac OS includes some security features that are helpful, but new malware easily bypasses them. In addition, they still don't address the adware and PUP problem at all. Because of this, macOS cannot and should not be considered bulletproof. End quote. And AV Comparatives says, quote, the effectiveness of Apple's built-in anti-malware features have been questioned, however, and some security experts recommend strengthening the defenses by adding in a third-party antivirus package. There are many good reasons for this. Firstly, the approach taken by Apple might be adequate for well-established malware, but might not respond quickly enough to emerging threats. Secondly, you might want a broader base of malware evaluation. Thirdly, macOS is not immune to bugs. End quote. In the book Cybersmart, which I've previously reviewed on this podcast, author Bart R. McDonough says there's far less malware for Macs than Windows, but there are adware, spyware, and potentially unwanted programs that macOS doesn't protect against, but anti-malware can protect against. User behavior. As is always the case with security, you need to account for the human user. Operating systems and third-party anti-malware can only do so much to protect you from yourself. OS10daily.com says, generally speaking, a well-secured Mac that has regularly updated system software and apps and some savviness from the user, including following some simple tips to help secure a Mac from malware and viruses, like not downloading sketchy stuff from untrustworthy or dubious websites and not installing browser plugins, is enough to prevent Macs from finding any malware, junkware, adware, ransomware, or any other nefarious stuff on their Mac. But nonetheless, infections can still happen, end quote. And AV Comparatives says, quote, experienced and responsible Mac users who are careful about which programs they install and which sources they obtain them from may well argue, very reasonably, that they are not at risk from Mac malware. However, we feel that non-expert users, children, and users who frequently like to experiment with new software could definitely benefit from having security software on their Mac systems, in addition to the security features provided by the Mac OS itself, end quote. Notice the mention of children in the last quote. You've probably noticed that your young kids are less experienced with navigating the web than the average adult. Young kids are always exploring online, visiting a variety of websites and installing games and other software. For these reasons, and because they don't yet understand internet safety, kids are likely to encounter malware. How to increase your security. There are many options when it comes to Mac anti-malware. 1. Don't use any anti-malware beyond what's built into macOS. 2. Use free anti-malware. 3. Use paid anti-malware. 4. Run on-demand scans, which run only when you start them. And 5. Run real-time scanning, which runs in the background as you use your Mac. And these are not mutually exclusive options. If after hearing this episode so far you would like to install anti-malware software on your Mac, which should you use? I mentioned earlier that I like to base decisions on data rather than marketing. Fortunately, there are organizations that test the effectiveness of Mac anti-malware. As much as I would love to conduct such testing on my own, unfortunately, I don't have the resources. How to find Mac antivirus ratings. There are 2 organizations I'm aware of that test Mac anti-malware in their labs and report the test results. One is AV Comparatives, and the other is AV Test. And you can find links to those in the blog post that goes along with this episode at defendingdigital.com. When considering anti-malware, you should look at the latest ratings and then look at the ratings over 3 to 5 years to get an idea for their track record. The Mac antivirus with the best test results. Looking at the test results from AV Comparatives and AV Test, I've made a list of the Mac anti-malware that has the best test results from both organizations. I've listed them in order of rating, and then for those that have the same rating, I've gone alphabetically. Each of these products have received the Approved Security Product Award from AV Comparatives, as well as full points in the Protection category from AV Test. And I have links to each of these in the blog post that goes along with this episode at defendingdigital.com. First is Bitdefender Antivirus for Mac, and it received a score of 18 out of 18 from AV Test. Next is Trend Micro Antivirus, which also received a score of 18 out of 18. Then is Avast Security for Mac, and that received 17.5 out of 18 points from AV Test. Then there's AVG Antivirus, which also received 17.5 out of 18 points from AV Test. Then there's Kaspersky Internet Security, also 17.5 out of 18 points from AV Test. Then Avira Antivirus Pro, 17 out of 18 points from AV Test. And finally, F-Secure Safe, which is also 17 out of 18 points from AV Test. And again, all of these have received the Approved Security Product Award from AV Comparatives, and also full points in the Protection category from AV Test. The best free antivirus for Mac. You may be wondering, is it necessary to pay for Mac antivirus, or can I use free antivirus? Well, 2 of the products that I just listed, which tested well, are free. There was Avast Security for Mac and AVG Antivirus. And those actually scored the same, both got 17.5 out of 18 points from AV Test. Free products can do as well as paid products in detecting, preventing, and removing malware. Paid products generally include more features, such as web filtering, a VPN, etc. You can also pay to upgrade from the free Avast and AVG software to get more features. The best paid antivirus for Mac. So if we remove those two free options, Avast and AVG, that leaves the remaining list for the best of the paid antivirus products. Those are Bitdefender Antivirus for Mac, 18 out of 18 from A/B Test, Trend Micro Antivirus, 18 out of 18 from A/B Test, Kaspersky Internet Security, 17.5 out of 18 from A/B Test, Avira Antivirus Pro, 17 out of 18 from A/B Test, and F-Secure Safe, 17 out of 18 from A/B Test. Mac antivirus that runs on demand only, not in the background. Anti-malware software usually runs in the background on your Mac, scanning files as you work with them. This is called real-time scanning, or on-access scanning, or background scanning. Most software also lets you run on-demand scans, meaning that the scan runs when you click the scan button. Some Mac anti-malware runs on-demand only. It does not do real-time scanning. The risk with on-demand only is that it's completely reactive. It only catches malware when it scans. The rest of the time, you're only protected by what's built into macOS. If you're not very tech savvy, or if you visit shady websites or install shady software, or you have kids who do, then you should have real-time scanning. I'm aware of two options for Mac anti-malware that runs on-demand only, not in the background. There's Malwarebytes for Mac and Bitdefender Virus Scanner. Again, links are in the blog post that goes along with this episode, which you can find at defendingdigital.com. Now, these two free products are not rated by AV Comparatives or AV Test, and I wasn't able to find test results from other sources. However, Bitdefender's paid product, Bitdefender Antivirus for Mac, has good test results, but I don't know how similar the scanner in the free product is to the paid one. Best Mac antivirus for you and your family. I've shared a lot of info with you, but which Mac antivirus should you pick for your family? I recommend that you install a third-party anti-malware, whether free or paid. If you want a free option, consider Avast Security for Mac. If you want a paid option, consider Bitdefender Antivirus for Mac. If you'd like other options, here again is the list of the most effective anti-malware as tested by AV Comparatives and AV Test. Bitdefender Antivirus for Mac, Trend Micro Antivirus, Avast Security for Mac, AVG Antivirus, Kaspersky Internet Security, Avira Antivirus Pro, and F-Secure Safe. Again, find links to all those in the blog post that goes along with the episode at defendingdigital.com. I recommend that at a minimum, you run an on-demand scan every week. If you're not very tech savvy, or you visit shady websites or install shady software, or your kids use your Mac, then you should have real-time scanning enabled. In case you missed that part about your kids using your Mac, I'll repeat. You've probably noticed that your young kids are less experienced with navigating the web than the average adult. Young kids are always exploring online, visiting a variety of websites and installing games and other software. For these reasons, and because they don't yet understand internet safety, kids are more likely to encounter malware. For their sakes and yours, you want a good anti-malware with real-time scanning. Let's say that you don't share your Mac with kids, and you opt to do on-demand scans rather than real-time scanning, and months or years pass without your on-demand scans finding any malware. In that case, you're probably fine to continue with on-demand scans rather than real-time scans. However, if your on-demand scans find malware, then I highly recommend that you start using real-time scanning. Just another tip, you should check out my Apple macOS security and privacy guide, which you can find at defendingdigital.com. What you should do. 1. Choose and install a third-party anti-malware, whether free or paid. Choose one with good test results. If you want a free option, consider Avast Security for Mac. If you want a paid option, consider Bitdefender Antivirus for Mac. 2. At a minimum, run an on-demand scan every week. If you're not very tech savvy, or you visit shady websites or install shady software, or your kids use your Mac, you should have real-time scanning enabled. And 3. If you're using on-demand only anti-malware and your scans find malware, then start using real-time scanning. That's it for today. You can learn more about internet safety and security at defendingdigital.com. And I'd love it if you would take a minute to leave a rating or review in whatever app or site that you're using to listen to this podcast. Also, think of a friend who's interested in internet safety, security, and digital parenting, and tell them about the podcast. Thank you.